Those Hellenes who had been appointed to serve in the fleet at Artemision were these. The Athenians furnished 127 ships, the greatest contribution of all. The Plataeans, moved by valor and zeal for the Hellenic cause, joined with the Athenians in manning their ships, though they had no practice in seamanship, a testament to their courage over their skill. The Corinthians furnished 40 ships, the Megarians 20. The Chalcidians manned 20 ships, which the Athenians furnished them. The Aegionites furnished 18 ships, the Sicyonians 12, the Lacedaemonians 10, the Epidaurians 8, the Erythraeans 7, the Troezenians 5, the Styrians 2, and the Caans 2 ships and 2 50-oared galleys. The Locrians of Opus came to assist with 7 50-oared galleys. In total, apart from the 50-oared galleys, 271 ships were assembled at Artemision. The commander who had supreme power was furnished by the Spartans, Eurybiades, son of Eurycleides, for the allies declared they would not follow the lead of the Athenians. Before they had even sent to Sicily to obtain allies, it had been proposed that the fleet should be placed in charge of the Athenians, but when the allies opposed this vehemently, the Athenians yielded, having it much at heart that Hellas should be saved. They perceived clearly that if they should have disagreement with one another about the leadership, Hellas would perish, and herein they judged rightly, for disagreement between those of the same race is worse than war undertaken with one consent, by as much as war itself is worse than peace. Being assured of this truth, the Athenians did not contend, but gave way for so long as they were urgently in need of the allies. That this was their true thinking, their subsequent conduct proved, for when, after repelling the Persian from themselves, they were now contending for his land and no longer for their own, they alleged the insolence of Pausanias as a pretext and took away the leadership from the Lacedaemonians. But this took place afterwards.
At this time, when the Hellenes who had come to Artemisium saw that a great number of Persian ships had put in at Aphetai, and that everything was filled with their armament, they were struck with fear. The fortunes of the barbarians had turned out far different from their expectations. They deliberated about retreating from Artemisium to the inner parts of Hellas, abandoning their forward position. The Euboeans, perceiving that the commanders were deliberating about retreat, grew desperate. They asked Eurybiades to stay there by them for a short time until they should have removed their children and households from danger. When he would not be persuaded, they went elsewhere. They went to Themistocles, the commander of the Athenians, and persuaded him by a payment of 30 talents, on condition that the fleet should stay and fight the sea battle in front of Euboea. Themistocles then caused the Hellenes to stay in the following cunning manner. To Eurybiades he imparted 5 talents of this sum, with the pretense that he was giving it from himself, from his own resources. When Eurybiades had been persuaded by this gift to change his resolution, Adimantos, son of Okytos, the Corinthian commander, was the only one of all the others who still made struggle, saying that he would sail away from Artemisium and would not stay with the others. To him, therefore, Themistocles said with an oath, "Thou at least shalt not leave us, for I will give thee greater gifts than the king of the Medes would send to thee, if thou shouldest desert thy allies." Thus he spoke, and at the same time he sent to the ship of Adimantos 3 talents of silver. So these commanders had all been persuaded by gifts to change their resolution, and at the same time the request of the Euboeans had been gratified, and Themistocles himself gained money. It was not known that he had kept the rest of the money, but those who received a share of it were fully persuaded that it had come from the Athenian state for this very purpose.
The barbarians, having arrived at Aphetai about the beginning of the afternoon, had been informed even before they came that a few ships of the Hellenes were stationed about Artemisium, and now seeing them for themselves with their own eyes, they were eager to attack them to see if they could capture them. They did not think it good yet to sail against them directly, however, for this reason. They feared that the Hellenes, when they saw the Persians sailing against them in full force, should set forth to take flight, and darkness should come upon them in their flight. Then the Hellenes were likely to get away, whereas it was right, according to Persian calculation, that not even the fire-bearer, not even the humblest sailor, should escape and save his life. With a view to preventing any escape, they contrived as follows. Of the whole number of their ships, they parted off 200 and sent them round to sail by Caphareus and round Geriastus to the Euripus, going outside Skyllias so that they might not be sighted by the enemy as they sailed around Euboea. Their purpose was that with these ships coming up by that way and blocking the enemy's retreat, and themselves advancing against the Greeks directly, they might surround them on all sides and trap them completely. Having formed this plan, they proceeded to send off the ships which were appointed for this flanking maneuver. They themselves had no design of attacking the Hellenes on that day, nor would they attack until the signal agreed upon should be displayed to them by those who were sailing round, to show that they had arrived and the trap was complete. These ships they were sending round, and meanwhile they were numbering the rest of their fleet at Aphetai, taking a full accounting of their strength.
During this time, while the Persians were numbering their ships, a thing came to pass. There was in that camp a man of Scion named Skyllias, as a diver, the best of all the men of that time. In the shipwreck which took place by Mount Pelion, he had saved for the Persians many of their goods, and many also he had acquired for himself, quite profitably, one might say. This Skyllias had had an intention even before this of deserting to the side of the Hellenes, but it had not been possible for him to do so then. In what manner after this attempt he did actually come to the Hellenes, I am not able to say with certainty, but I marvel if the tale is true which is reported. It is said that he dived into the sea at Aphetai, and did not come up till he reached Artemision, having traversed somewhere about 80 furlongs through the sea, 10 miles under water. Now there are told about this man several other tales which seem likely to be false, but some also which are true. About this matter, however, let it be stated as my opinion that he came to Artemision in a boat, as seems far more probable. Then, when he had come, he forthwith informed the commanders about the shipwreck, how it had come to pass, and, most critically, of the ships which had been sent away to go around Euboea to trap them.
Hearing this intelligence, the Hellenes considered the matter with one another. After many things had been spoken, the prevailing opinion was that they should remain there that day and encamp on shore, and then, when midnight was past, they should set forth and go to meet those ships which were sailing round Euboea. After this, however, as no Persian force sailed out to attack them, they waited for the coming of the late hours of the afternoon, and then sailed out themselves to attack the barbarians. They desired to make a trial both of the Persian manner of fighting and of the maneuver called breaking the line, the diekplus. Seeing the Greeks sailing thus against them with few ships, not only the other men in the army of Xerxes, but also their commanders judged them to be moved by mere madness. They themselves put out their ships to sea, supposing that they would easily capture the Greeks. Their expectation was reasonable enough, since they saw that the ships of the Hellenes were few, while theirs were many times as numerous and sailed better in open water. Setting their mind confidently on this, the Persians came round and enclosed the Greeks in the middle with their superior numbers.
Then so many of the Ionians as were kindly disposed to the Hellenes, and were serving in the Persian expedition against their will, counted it a matter of great grief to themselves when they saw the Greeks being surrounded. They felt assured that not one of the Greeks would return home, so feeble did they think the power of the Hellenes to be. But those Ionians to whom the encirclement of the Greeks was a source of pleasure were vying with one another, each one endeavoring to be the first to take an Athenian ship and receive gifts from the king. For in the Persian camps there was more talk of the Athenians than of any others. They were the prize everyone sought. The Hellenes, meanwhile, when the signal was given, first set themselves with prows facing the barbarians, and drew the sterns of their ships together in the middle, forming a defensive circle. When the signal was given a second time, although shut off in a small space and prow against prow with the enemy, they set to work vigorously. They captured 30 ships of the barbarians, and also Philion, the son of Xerxes, the brother of Gorgos, king of the Salaminians, who was a man of great repute in the Persian army. Now the first of the Hellenes who captured a ship of the enemy was an Athenian, Lycomedes, the son of Ischreus, and he received the prize for valor. So these forces, as they were contending in this sea fight with doubtful result, were parted from one another by the coming on of night. The Hellenes accordingly sailed away to Artemision, and the barbarians to Aphetai, the contest having been widely different from Persian expectations. In this sea fight, Antidorus of Lemnos alone of the Hellenes who were serving with the king deserted to the side of the Hellenes, and the Athenians, on account of this deed, gave him a piece of land in Salamis as a reward.
When darkness had come on, although the season was the middle of summer, there came on very abundant rain which lasted through the whole of the night, with crashing thunder from Mount Pelion. The dead bodies and pieces of wreck were cast up at Aphetai and became entangled round the prows of the ships and struck against the blades of the oars. The men of the Persian army who were there, hearing the crashes and feeling the corpses bumping against their vessels, became afraid, expecting that they would certainly perish. To such troubles had they come. For before they had even had breathing space after the shipwreck and the storm which had arisen off Mount Pelion, there had come upon them a hard sea fight, and after the sea fight, this violent storm of rain and strong streams rushing to the sea and crashing thunder. Those Persians who had been appointed to sail round Euboea experienced the very same night, but against them it raged much more fiercely, inasmuch as it fell upon them while they were making their course in the open sea. The end of it proved distressful to them indeed. When the storm and the rain came upon them as they sailed, being then off the hollows of Euboea, they were borne by the wind, not knowing by what way they were carried, and were cast away upon the rocks. All this was being brought about by God, in order that the Persian force might be made more equal to that of the Hellenes, and might not be by very much the larger. These men then were perishing about the hollows of Euboea. Meanwhile the Persians at Aphetai, when they had dawned upon them, of which they were very glad, kept their ships quiet. They were satisfied in their evil plight to remain still for the present time and not to engage. But to the Hellenes there came as reinforcement 53 Athenian ships. The coming of these gave them more courage, and at the same time they were encouraged also by a report that those of the barbarians who had been sailing round Euboea had all been destroyed by the storm that had taken place. They waited then for the same time of day as before, late afternoon, and then they sailed and fell upon some Cilician ships. Having destroyed these, they sailed away when darkness came on and returned to Artemision. On the third day, the commanders of the barbarians, being exceedingly indignant that so small a number of ships should thus do them damage, and fearing what Xerxes might do to them for their failure, did not wait this time for the Hellenes to begin the fight. They passed the word of command and put out their ships to sea about the middle of the day. Now it happened that these battles at sea and the battles on land at Thermopylae took place on the same days. For those who fought by sea, the whole aim of the fighting was concerned with the channel of Euripos, just as the aim of Leonidas and of his band was to guard the pass at Thermopylae. The Hellenes accordingly exhorted one another not to let the barbarians go by into Hellas, while the Persians cheered one another on to destroy the fleet of the Hellenes and to get possession of the straits. While the forces of Xerxes were sailing in order towards them, the Hellenes kept quiet at Artemision. The Persians, having made a crescent of their ships that they might enclose the Greeks, were endeavoring to surround them. Then the Hellenes put out to sea and engaged with them. In this battle, the two sides were nearly equal to one another. The fleet of Xerxes, by reason of its great size and numbers, suffered damage from itself, since the ships were thrown into confusion and ran into one another. Nevertheless, it stood out and did not give way, for the Persians disdained to be turned to flight by so few ships. Many ships, therefore, of the Hellenes were destroyed, and many men perished, but many more ships and men of the barbarians fell. In this sea fight, the Egyptians did best of the men who fought for Xerxes. These, besides other great deeds which they displayed, captured 5 ships of the Hellenes together with their crews. While of the Hellenes, those who did best on this day were the Athenians, and of the Athenians, Skyllias, the son of Alcibiades, who was serving with 200 men and a ship of his own, furnishing the expense at his own proper cost, a private citizen equipping a warship from his own wealth.
Having parted from this hard-fought battle, both sides gladly hastened to their moorings. After they had separated and gotten away out of the sea fight, the Hellenes had possession of the bodies of the dead and of the wrecks of the ships. Yet, having suffered severely, especially the Athenians, of whose ships half had been disabled, they were deliberating now about retreating to the inner parts of Hellas. Themistocles, however, had conceived a plan. He thought that if there should be detached from the force of the barbarians, the Ionian and Carian nations, the Greeks would be able to overcome the rest. When the people of Euboea were driving their flocks down to the sea to save them from the advancing Persians, he assembled the generals. He said to them that he thought he had a device by which he hoped to cause the best of the king's allies to leave him. This matter he revealed to that extent only. With regard to their present circumstances, he said that they must do as follows. Every one must slaughter of the flocks of the Euboeans as many as he wanted, for it was better that their army should have them than the enemy. Moreover, he advised that each one should command his own men to kindle a fire. As for the time of their departure, he would see to it in such wise that they should come safe to Hellas. This they were content to do, and forthwith when they had kindled fires they turned their attention to the flocks. Then Themistocles selected those ships of the Athenians which sailed best, and went round to the springs of drinking water along the coast, cutting inscriptions on the stones there. The Ionians read these when they came to those places on the following day. These inscriptions ran thus: Ionians, ye act not rightly in making expedition against the fathers of your race, and endeavoring to enslave Hellas. Best of all were it that ye should come and be on our side. But if that may not be done by you, stand aside even now from the combat against us, and ask the Carians to do the same as ye. If, however, neither of these two things is possible to be done, and ye are bound down by too strong compulsion to be able to make revolt, then in the action, when we engage battle, be purposely slack, remembering that ye are descended from us, and that our quarrel with the barbarian took its rise at the first from you. Themistocles wrote thus, having two things together in his mind. Either the inscriptions might elude the notice of the king and cause the Ionians to change and come over to the side on which he was, or they might be reported and denounced to Xerxes and cause the Ionians to be distrusted by him, and so he might keep them apart from the sea fights. Either outcome would benefit the Greek cause.
In the night, the scout from Trachis arrived. There was at Artemisium a scout named Pallius, by birth of Anticyra, to whom it had been appointed that if the fleet should be disabled, he should signify this to those at Thermopylae with a vessel equipped and ready for this purpose. Similarly, there was with Leonidas Abronichus, son of Lysicles, an Athenian, ready to carry news to those at Artemisium with a 30-oared galley if any disaster should happen to the land army. This Abronichus had now arrived, and he proceeded to signify to them that which had come to pass about Leonidas and his army, that they had all perished, that Thermopylae had fallen, that the way into Greece lay open. When the commanders were informed of this, they no longer put off their retreat, but set forth in the order in which they were severally posted, the Corinthians first, and the Athenians last, as was their honor. Thus ended the battles at Artemisium, hard-fought engagements that had held the Persian fleet in check, but could not be sustained once Thermopylae had fallen and the Greek position was turned.
The Persian land army, which had directed its march through Boeotia in company with Xerxes, burned the city of the Thespians, the inhabitants having left it and gone to the Peloponnese, and that of the Plataeans likewise. Then the Persians came to Athens and laid waste everything in those regions. Xerxes had burned Thespiae and Plataea because he was informed by the Thebans that these cities were not taking the side of the Medes. In 3 months from the crossing of the Hellespont, having stayed there 1 month while they crossed over into Europe, the Persians reached Attica in the year when Skyllias was archon of the Athenians. They took the lower city, which was deserted. They found that there were still a few Athenians left in the temple, either stewards of the temple or needy persons, who had barred the entrance to the Acropolis with doors and with a palisade of timber, and endeavored to defend themselves against the attacks of the enemy. These men had not gone out to Salamis, partly because of their poverty, and also because they thought that they alone had discovered the meaning of the oracle which the Pythian prophetess had uttered to them, namely that the bulwark of wood should be impregnable. They supposed that this wooden palisade was in fact the safe refuge, according to the oracle, and not the ships, as Themistocles had argued. The Persians took their post upon the rising ground opposite the Acropolis, which the Athenians call the Hill of Ares, and proceeded to besiege them. They put tow round about their arrows and lighted it, and then shot flaming arrows against the palisade. The Athenians who were besieged continued to defend themselves nevertheless, although they had come to the extremity of distress, and their palisade had played them false. When the sons of Pisistratos, the Athenian exiles in Xerxes' company, brought them proposals for surrender, the defenders would not accept them. Instead, endeavoring to defend themselves, they contrived several devices against the enemy. Among the rest, they rolled down large stones when the barbarians approached the gates, so that for a long time Xerxes was in difficulty, not being able to capture them. In time, however, there appeared for the barbarians a way of approach after their difficulties, since by the oracle it was destined that all of Attica, which is on the mainland, should come to be under the Persians. On the front side of the Acropolis, behind the gates and the way up to the entrance, in a place where no one was keeping guard, for no one would have supposed that any man could ascend by this way. Here men climbed up by the temple of Aglauris, the daughter of Cecrops, although indeed the place is precipitous. When the Athenians saw that the Persians had ascended up to the Acropolis, some of them threw themselves down from the wall and perished, while others took refuge in the sanctuary of the temple. Those of the Persians who had ascended went first to the gates, and after opening these, they proceeded to kill the suppliants.
When all had been slain by them, they plundered the temple and set fire to the whole of the Acropolis. Xerxes, having fully taken possession of Athens, sent to Susa a mounted messenger to report to Artabanos the good success which they had had. On the next day after sending the herald, he called together the exiles of the Athenians who were accompanying him, and bade them go up to the Acropolis and sacrifice the victims after their own manner. Whether it was that he had seen some vision of a dream which caused him to give this command, or perchance he had a scruple in his mind because he had set fire to the temple, the Athenian exiles did accordingly that which was commanded them. There is in this Acropolis a temple of Erechtheus, who is said to have been born of the earth, and in this there is an olive tree and a sea, which according to the story told by the Athenians, Poseidon and Athene set as witnesses of themselves when they contended for the land. Now it happened to this olive tree to be set on fire with the rest of the temple by the barbarians. On the next day after the conflagration, those of the Athenians who were commanded by the king to offer sacrifice saw, when they had gone up to the temple, that a shoot had run up from the stalk of the tree about a cubit length. These then made report of this miracle, a sign that Athens, though burned, would rise again.